ke mai luna mai e. O nā mea una no e au, o nā mele.
We opened the hale this morning with ceremony and with the protocol. We did our oli of HAWAI'I for us to reach to our ancestors, that we may open ourselves to hear messages that are hidden, to hear understanding, and to, in the process of opening ourselves, be able to listen with your ears, ho'olohe, not just with 2 ears, but with 3 ears. Yeah. Listen to what is said, but listen to what is not said. To use our eyes to nana and to pick up messages that's around us. That's ho'ailona, that tell us something. And for the uninitiated, and many of you are uninitiated, it means, like the Hawaiian, fine-tune your 5 senses. Because it's all about us. It's not just listening for up here, but it's being able to feel this breeze that is so nice. Being able to pick up. Earlier, I looked for the ho'ailona, and the clouds were white and bright, but I'm seeing the clouds that are darker now, and taking some of that heat away, you know? So that's a good sign for me, because I'm thinking as a teacher, if it's so still, it's very difficult for haumana to focus. So I'm very conscious of ho'ailona, which are the cues and the signs of nature that respond to our ehomai. These are the hidden messages that make it possible for us to have a session here in a way that we maximize ourselves to be able to pick up the messages. Yeah. So, immerse yourself with your 5 senses. Whenever we have class, think about when we do that chant, ehomai. Because it means when I do that, I open myself, so I have my hands out. I'm ready to receive whatever that message is. I'm ready to receive. So in your own way, determine how you can center yourself to open yourself to those cues, those messages that come. And so this is the second session that we have. The protocol has been done for us. So let's begin today. Okay. This flyer was distributed earlier. Dolly, do you have one? Okay. So it's to give you an idea of the topics that will be covered on those dates. But there's something about this, the sessions of these dates. I've been talking with some of the other faculty, and I've said to them, if you're repeating some of these areas, like on the Huaka'i to go to Waianae Comprehensive Health Center, I found out one of the other faculty has already scheduled a session there. So I asked him, can my class join you? Can we all go together? Because the ones that will do the presentation will be listed as Kamaki Kanahele and probably his assistants. So once I confirm that date, I'll let you all know. What's going to happen is those of you that cannot make that day, that's the way it falls. It's just one of those things. And maybe it's not meant to be for you. But for those that can make it, then here's an opportunity for within the family of West Oʻahu, for us to help each other as faculty to ensure that students get an exposure to our resources, not just from me within this hali, but how do then we connect with outside in the community, okay? I have listed here what is Lokahi and Pono from last week, and today it is to talk about the Hawaiian Way. What do we mean by the Hawaiian Way? And why do we want to talk about the Hawaiian Way? Okay. I've taught Ho'oponopono in the past, and the style of Ho'oponopono that I do is one that I learned from Mary Kawinopukui. And then my students are so akamai on the computer, they Google, and they call up Ho'oponopono, and they're reading that, and it is such a contrast to the way that I've been taught. The dilemma for me is, what is my kuleana to keep as close to the tradition as possible that I've learned from my Kumu, and yet at the same time to appreciate that there are different styles. Different Kumu have different styles. The bottom line for me is, in Lua, one of the things that we learned is that there are many hand movements, self-defense, leg kicks, self-defense. But if these techniques go by animals never known to Hawaii, I can say, that's not Hawaiian. Okay, so it's one of the things I want to alert you to. I'm not going to condemn others for having their ways, because if it works for them, it works. But I do want you to put on your thinking hat. What do they say? Was that process or those tools known to our traditional Hawaiians? And did we use them? And then if our Hawaiians never use them, then I leave it up to you to make your own decision of what is authentic. So, to get back to the outline here, it's important that we recognize in this day and age there will be many people who will try to pick up the process of Ho'oponopono and apply it from where they come from. And I've seen too many instances where people pick up the book that I showed you last time, Nanaike Kumu Volume 1, and it identifies the list of concepts and the procedures, and they use it like a recipe. So I do this, I do that, I do this, I do that. I know Ho'oponopono. Okay. The Hawaiian Way is critical. It is the main ingredient in applying procedures. And so I wanted to be sure that we had an opportunity to talk about this. What is the Hawaiian Way? Because when you do Hawaiian healing, there's critical ingredients in this process that makes it different from a person who's going to do it like a baker, go by the recipe. Yeah. So that's our discussion for today. September 4th is a holiday, so we won't be meeting, okay? On the third session, September 11th, we're going to go over worldviews. Now, you know from previous presentations that my background is in social work. And the kind of social work that we do is to help those who have trouble functioning and dealing with making decisions in life. We deal with those situations where there's physical abuse, sexual molestation, substance abuse with drugs, with alcohol. We deal with trauma, okay? And this doesn't mean that trauma did not happen in the ancient days. Trauma happened, but they didn't have the kind of abuse like with the drugs and the alcohol and beating up family members. They didn't have that. And for kamali'i with children, children were prized. So child abuse was a no-no. So social work today uses Ho'oponopono to reconnect situations that get our people into difficulties today. So keep that as a background, as where I'm coming from. Because as we go through, we're going to have to go over spirituality. And you know, many of those kinds of situations I just talked about, spirituality is missing. It's not there. So how do we use Ho'oponopono with that? Ho'oponopono is a spiritually based process that engages family members connected to that problem in a way that helps them to look at how they contribute to the problem. In the situations I talked about, more people are apt to say, it's not me, it's not my problem, it's their problem. But Ho'oponopono is based upon looking at yourself first before pointing fingers. Yeah. So, easy to do Ho'oponopono? By no means. No. Hananui. Yeah. Yeah. So how do we connect with these situations where these individuals have become removed from culture, have forgotten their family ways, or maybe had not been taught the family values, you know? So this outline is going to talk about cultural trauma too, to help us look at, it's not just the ones that are the statistics, but it's every single one of us. We have been impacted by cultural historical trauma. And if one is to do Ho'oponopono, it's really important that we recognize that we've been impacted, yeah, in very subtle ways. So listen for the unspoken message. Yeah. And then I have Huaka'i on September the 25th. And because it's going to another site, this means we're going to need more class time. And those of you who have another class immediately following, I'm going to leave it up to you to determine if you want to go on the Huaka'i and leave the Huaka'i early to come back for your class. Or the unspeakable, which is, you got to decide what class you want to go. It's choices, choices. And for this program that I'm in, I don't have the kala to get a bus. So I'm going to have to rely on those of us who have cars to pull rides. Yeah. So as we get closer to that time, the session before, we can find out who intends to go on the Huaka'i and who can give rides. Okay? So we'll depend on each other to be able to do that. On October the 2nd, because spirituality is part of healing and health, the person who is the provider of the help has to come with certain essential attitudes. And so this is where I begin to talk about the healer. What are the characteristics inherent in this role? And to begin asking all of us, is this a career path for me? Because my intention is not just have you go through this so you keep it to yourself. No way. My agenda is you're going to look at yourself maybe as the catalyst for your own ohana. And if you can help your own ohana in the beginnings of looking at Ho'oponopono as a way of life, how you treat each other, how you deal with each other when there's pilikia, when there's problems, yeah? And because you're here on this campus, this also tells me the bachelor's degree. Because do you want to just limit it to your family? Or is this possibly a career path for me? That I can move beyond my ohana and I can apply this knowledge to help others who are in need. Because there's plenty work out there. Plenty work. And if participating in something like Ho'oponopono leads you into a health career, then I feel I've done my job. But of course, you know, I'm going to push for social work because that's where my love is. Because you give back to the families and the individuals who so need the help. And the more that we can do to help people, then we help all of Hawaii. So I'm not just being selfish, because it's like a stone that you throw in the water. The rippling waves begin to expand out, and it touches other areas, like in the community. Might touch the area with your children when they go to school. And then your children can say to the troublemaker, "Don't fight me. I don't want to fight. And if you're not going to listen, I'm going to tell my teacher." Rather than feeling that they have to succumb to the bullying, rather than feeling they have to put up their dukes to protect themselves. Yeah. What we do with our kamali'i can influence how they relate in the school. So it's that stone, that pebble I want to throw in the water that has that rippling effect. Yeah. If you go into nursing, wonderful. Because you know, I'm a kidney dialysis patient, but many of the patients in the clinic that I attend, I can guesstimate about 80% are Hawaiians. And it does mean finances, health insurance is very important. Because when I look at my Kaiser plan and the bill that comes every month, $5,000–6,000. Our family is going to need help. With the way things are going at the national, federal level, we don't know what kind of health insurance is going to come down to us or what might be taken away. So our families are going to need the help to look at creative ways to provide those kinds of resources that can help the needy. Okay? So focus on yourself if you want to be in this line of work. And then October 9, 16, I have self-care. Let me tell you, when I do Ho'oponopono, by the time I'm finished, usually 2, 3, 4 hours, I am so exhausted. I'm so exhausted. And I realize you mobilizing the mana within yourself to be utilized in a way that helps people to begin healing themselves. So in this line of that business that I'm talking about, you cannot just think of give, 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 do, 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 do. You're going to have to think about, how do I replenish my own mana? Okay? And we know that in Hawaii, there are several ways in which you can do this. You can protect yourself, you can replenish yourself. And so it'll come under the self-care. Ho'oma'e, cleansing rituals. How do you protect yourself from being demonetized? That's a holy word, and I should have been doing it that way. But I think you understand it, demonetized. You want to prevent that from happening. Because when you go in, you want to be able to direct your mana in a positive way to helping. So cleansing rituals, yeah. Exercise and lomi. So we'll have someone come and do some lomi techniques and tell us about the use of lomi lomi for self-care. And then I've got scheduled on October 23rd, and that one is confirmed. We have a huaka'i to Kukaniloko, and that is in Wahiawa, to Tom's place. Yeah, he's confirmed it for us, yeah. So that is the birthing stones area. Very, very sacred, yeah. So our health begins from birth. And so it opens another avenue of a possibility in health. I don't know if there's a midwifery course on campus, but you know, that's a possibility if it's not here. Or if it isn't, then you go outside and you look. Yeah, okay. And then we have la'au lapa'au. It's so important that we be aware of our environment. The very weeds that we see out here that thrive in this dry land, uhaloa. Hey, that's medicine. When I was young and I had tonsillitis, and when my father heard the doctor wanted me to go in for surgery, he said, no way. He went out by Kalaipohaku. That's near Blowhole Kokahead on Oʻahu, the dry area. And he went looking for uhaloa. He brought home the uhaloa, he prepared it. But his way of preparing it was not to strain the juices out. He cleaned it and he softened the roots. And then he had it in chunks and he said, okay, baby, you chew on this and you suck it down. And he had lots on hand for me to use, to chew. And you know, there's a thought. The medicine that is bitter is the strongest medicine for you. And I made all kinds of faces. I wanted orange juice, I wanted water. And he said, no. And each time I said, Pao, no more any juice coming out. He said, put it in my hand. He said, no, suck some more. Chew on it. Well, I did the treatment. And when I went in to have the doctor look at me, he said, it has shrunk so much. I didn't need the operation. Okay. So why am I talking about la'au lapa'au? As adults, we have a kuleana to take care our own. And we have evidence of how Hawaiian medicine has worked with our people. And some of these plants have been tested by science today. But it's so amazing. It was part of our knowledge of our ancestors. And so the more we can take care of the la'au from within our own area that we can raise so that there's no pesticides used, the better it is for our family. And so in healing and in health, ho'oponopono, lomi lomi, la'au lapa'au were the Hawaiians' practices for health and healing. Okay? So self-care is the portion that we're going to do. And hopefully we'll be able to have someone come in who has been taught by, he was la'au lapa'au specialist from Kauai, and he has had many haumana on him, under him who have trained under him. So hopefully we'll get someone who is recognized to be a healer in the use of la'au lapa'au that will come and teach us for that morning. What I'd like to have them do is give a presentation on the style that they do in providing treatment in the use of la'au lapa'au, because all of these practices are spiritually based. Yeah? And I have here November 13, Huaka'i to the Waianae Comprehensive Health Center. Now that is going to be changed because we're going to be joining your class. Can you tell us that date so we can make the change on our schedule?
I can later.
Okay, next time.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Now, I have for the last 3 sessions, I have mo'olelo presentations and turn the papers in. When I talk about mo'olelo, I'm talking about a Hawaiian experience that has happened to you, to a relative, to someone that you know, or an experience that's not Western based. Many cultures have their own experiences that are culture based for them. And so if you can make that kind of connection between your own background and with the Hawaiian that's being presented, I can accept that kind of mo'olelo too. Okay? Because what you will be exhibiting is you will have been able to identify universal similarities that all cultures are faced with in providing for that society that you come from. And I just like to honor and respect your ability and your sense of connectedness with your own self. Yeah. Not only do I want you to write it down, because I'd like for you to capture in that write-up why you selected that story to tell us. What was the lesson for you in getting this? And how has this mo'olelo affected your life to where you are today? Because Hawaiian culture is just not for knowledge to be read and to be out there. In health and healing, culture means there's life in that. How does it apply to you today? What can you build upon it? How can it motivate you and guide you to explore other reaches? Okay? So the written part is one side. The other part is, I would like for you to consider doing an oral presentation so we can all share with each other. Learn from each other. Okay? So it may mean if you have difficulty with doing oral presentation, let me know. And we'll see how we can set it up so that it doesn't become a traumatic experience for you. But you know, you're here in a university system. So it's not just take. It's how do you come across? Because it involves relationships. So how do you come across? How do you present your idea so it reflects the clarity of purpose for which you chose this story? And don't wait until the morning of your presentation to tell me, oh, you're so scared, you can present. I like him the week before so we can meet and we can practice. I don't mind sitting down with you and you olelo to me. And then I listen, I can help you out. And if we need other people as part of an audience, no worry. I can get people to volunteer to be part of the audience to give you the chance to practice, okay? And the other thing too, if some of the mo'olelo that you have written on, 3 of them, if 1 or 2 are kapu, but you still want to write on it, you don't have to talk about it, okay? I respect that. So hopefully, it can be a mo'olelo about how this little girl in the family was given up at birth to another Hawaiian family, and that she was lavehanai and then adopted informally. But then the social worker got involved with the family when they needed financial help and realized that legally that child doesn't have a basis, a legal basis. So what did the social worker do? Help them to formalize it and provided the funding so that can go through adoption, because the older siblings and the adoptive parents did not want to disrupt that relationship. So this is a mo'olelo about hanai. It doesn't have to be pilikia. It doesn't have to be abuse and all of that. There are other Hawaiian practices that we have had. And so it's up to you to choose what you want to share, okay? So future courses is really focused on Ho'oponopono to prepare you to become a practitioner. In Ho'oponopono, and I didn't cover this last week, but Ho'oponopono is a way in which within the family, in your household, you solve kid problems with each other. If you have a partner, it's a way in which you talk about what's going to happen and how does it affect each one. And so the first class will focus on knowing yourself. And I call that ho'opono, to bring yourself in alignment. Because before you can help others, you have to know how to help yourself. You got to recognize what it is that's within inside of you that can make the situation worse. So ho'opono is the first level. And this is helping families deal with pilikia that happens in the day, the here and the now. Getting along with each other. Working it out with your partner. Identifying expectations and meeting expectations, or dealing with unexpectations, expectations that are not fulfilled, okay? The next level of the course is at the conscious, the subconscious, but goes to the unconscious level, and that I call Haku Ho Oponopono. And that's really at the level of a master's degree in social work. it's working with the individuals to really look at themselves and examine why they react this way. And sometimes they know it, sometimes they don't know it, but they project out, okay? But then they've had some trauma. Years in the past, they've been able to kind of cover it over. And they've been able to continue living and getting along. But for some reason, this other person just triggers that wrong thing in the back of their mind that they thought that they handled. That is dealing with, in psychological terms, transference. Something happened so far early on in your life, you're not even conscious of it coming through. I would say most people have those experiences. We go through life, we've done things that we don't like, we're ashamed of. And we've gone through life living so that we push it down. We push it back so that we don't want to recall it. And we're able to get along, that's okay. But something happens, and then that gets tickled, but you're not aware of it. Yeah. And you don't know how come that happens. Okay. Let me give you an example. When I graduated from high school, I experienced the first death in the family that was very important to me. My grandfather died. But he died when I was away on the mainland going to school. And he died 1 week before school was out. And the family decided they were going to go ahead with the funeral before I came back home. So I really didn't have a chance to grieve, to let him go. Now, I would say I would have been about 19 years old at that point. I handled it. I go to the graveyard, I say hi to man, but I never dealt with the pain and the eha. So I get married, I go to school, I get my degree, I meet up with Tutupukui, and lo and behold, she hanais my husband and I as part of her ohana. And because we're really interested in the culture, and I was learning to do ho'oponopono, she recommended us going to visit the ohana in Ka'u on the Big Island. And it was with this family that the yearnings of had. See, as I was growing up, after my grandfather died, I said, oh, if I only had him and he was alive today, I don't have to go to school to learn this. I can talk story with him. So I missing that opportunity to learn from my own kupuna. Well, not realizing it, years later, we get to meet Tutu Ku'umikinin. And suddenly that relationship just opens and it blossoms. He becomes Tutu. He becomes Tutu man. And in the sense that I realize, here's my opportunity to make up for what I didn't have with my own grandfather. Okay, we have 6, 7 years together. Beautiful relationship, giving back and forth. And he lucked to us too, because his children not interested in the culture. And he wants to share so much with them, but they're not interested. So here comes these two from Puhoi, and suddenly they're sponges. They're just sucking it all in. Well, the aloha blossoms. okay? Like a true grandfather. So when he passed away at his time, I cried, and the family always turned to my husband and I when it came with dealing with Western Palapala. So we helped him navigate for Social Security, for health insurance, dealing with those funds that were due for the elderly to help with the hospital bills. And so we were very much a part of the family in working through this. And we did cunning cow for him and gave expression to our love. But you know, I didn't realize when I'm part of a musical group and we had learned some ka'u songs. So when we played the music, oh, I started to uwe. And as musicians, we were up in the front and the tears would just roll down my face. I didn't know why, and I said, oh, this is ka'u, and I love ka'u, but I don't know why the tears are coming. And this continued for the whole year, and my friend who's a social worker said to me, Kahikili, where are your tears coming from? I said, I don't know. I said, because Tutuku'umi, oh, we cried our hearts out with all the family and over a period of the 1 year. And as a good Ho'oponopono person, you begin with yourself. And I said, where is this coming from? And I realized my tutu who had died like 15 years in the past, where I thought everything was okay. The tears were the unshed tears I never got to do for him. And when I made that connection, then I had to go to the grave and talk a story with him and acknowledge that, yeah? Because if you're dealing with death and loss, and you're the healer, you cannot be allowing your unresolved feelings to get into the way of helping other people. And that was a lesson that I learned, yeah. So the hala was 15 years earlier in my life. It didn't prevent me from doing what I wanted to do. It was okay. But Ho'oponopono helps you as a healer to recognize that maybe each of us has some areas that have not been dealt with. It doesn't mean you cannot do Ho'oponopono. What it does mean is the moment that it is shown to you and somebody raises that question, where is this coming from? You have a kuleana to do your own looking into yourself so you can deal with that. Yeah, you know, people who are loving, aloha has a depth that goes very deep. And so oftentimes, aloha is the very thing that you utilize in reaching out to others. But know that there's a possibility that maybe in aloha, there might be an area that is unfinished, okay? So that would be a mo'olelo I can write about and talk about how I can relate it now to Ho'oponopono, because I talked about it, yeah? So in that way, I've now made a connection. But because I did it for that one doesn't mean I've done it for all. I'm sure there are things I did to my parents that in their wisdom, they never hang on to it. They went oki, they went cut. so it didn't interfere in the relationship. But you know, with families or individuals that you work through, sometimes it's much easier to forgive the other person, but it's very hard to forgive yourself. Yeah, so that means it's very deep. And it may require having to talk it out to someone. I read a newspaper article of this young woman who had an opportunity to go to the Orient and to experience life there. She got into drugs and got convicted by the government of that country. And suddenly now she's in a foreign country, no resources about her, and she's thinking about her family. Well, the love of parents and ohana come to bear, and they're doing everything they can, to the extent they take a second mortgage out on the house. And they eventually find they cannot keep up with all of the payments because Papa dies. The source of income is no longer available. They lose the place. And then these are unforeseen consequences. She's done the verbal part. She's done the thinking part. But can she forgive herself for not having listened to them in the first place? It would have prevented all of this. Yeah. And although she's worked through the many layers, she admits, I'm not sure if I can forgive myself. She struggles with that. Yeah. No, we're not all going to go through that same thing. Okay. But know that in individuals' lifetime, there are many layers of pilikia that you work through. Some that create serious trauma become the most difficult one to wrestle with. So Ho'oponopono is a preventive. If you do it when the pilikia is small, it prevents big things from happening, more complex things from happening. So this is why I like to share Ho'oponopono. Because while you have an opportunity to arm your family, your ohana, with the positive practices of Hawaiian culture, then things will work out. You preventing big things from happening by taking care of little things. Yeah? Any question on this?
Can the Hawaiian way be, let me put it this way, not only for the Hawaiian person with Hawaiian blood, but for the person who is not of Hawaiian
The
descent?
question is, can the Hawaiian way apply not just for the Kanaka, but for others as well? Yeah. My personal belief is yes. While going to the university, I met a colleague, another student, pure Japanese. But we just clicked like brothers and sisters. And we said to each other, because Tutupukui taught us, he said, when you feel this connection, this spark, there's a way that you can adopt each other. So he became my ho'okaikunani, my Hanai brother. And you know, his Japanese parents raised plantation on Kauai, recognized that their son was more Hawaiian than he was Japanese. He was Japanese only as a samurai. But other than that, his whole outlook and the way he malama things, he loved growing things, and he loved using those things that he grew. And his heart was always so genuine. And that was what I picked up. So we became brother and sister. And in the end, the parents knew that this boy, the oldest boy in a Japanese family, was not going to marry a Japanese girl. And they accepted it as his hanai for each other. When I had my children, of course, he was going to be the godfather. And the first time we brought the children over to meet his parents, Mama said, come, tutu lady. And she said, tutu lady. At that point, I knew she fully accepted the relationship I had with him. Yeah? So, what was it that made it possible for non-related people, not of the same background, to connect and have that spark?
So
Yeah.
aloha.
Aloha. You know, in the Hawaiian way, aloha is given, yeah? And it's reflected in our hospitality. So we give and we give. But when the other side receives, it stirs up inside of them, I want to nurture this. I so appreciate. And I have this feeling of going beyond liking, so that if something ever happens to them, I want to be there for them. So in Ho'oponopono, when we talk about the Hawaiian way, it is applying the methodology with the knowledge that whatever you do it from deep down in your na'au. If it's not coming from your na'au, and it's you're trying to remember how to do step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, that's not Ho'oponopono. That's not Ho'oponopono. So, it's got to be from your na'au that you are genuinely give of yourself to make things happen and change in a positive way. While at the same time, we have to recognize sometimes all that you do and all that you give might not be the solution. And so, in Ho'oponopono, it's not your problem. The way I've seen it is, in those cases I've encountered where they cannot respond, that tells me they're not ready. They're not ready for Ho'oponopono, and therefore it's not going to work. So, Ho'oponopono, like the Hawaiian way, is two-sided. There's privilege and responsibility on two sides. And many situations in Ho'oponopono, when you connect and it works out, the relationship is pilipa'a for life. It is close. It is as if you have been born as ohana to each other. Yeah. But in Ho'oponopono, you don't take that experience with you into the future. You leave it with the family. Like one family said to me, we've always had love. It's not a problem. My family we know what love is. We know what it is to give to each other. But after working through this hala that occurred 23 years in the past, and getting them to look at what that hala, that pilikio was, and getting them to be able to think beyond themselves for the good of the other person, what they wanted to do. The working through of that situation just caused the love that they had inside of them to who? How many of you have seen the poi bowl? That as it begins to ferment and it rises and it overflows. Well, poi is the staple, and the more sour it is, the more onho it is. And so, you know, even when it has that bacteria on the top, turn white, whoo, broke them out. We just mix it in again, and then we eat it, yeah. That's an example of who. And so the love in this family just overflowed. And the father of the family said, Auntie, thank you so much. You gave us an opportunity to remind each other that love for the family cannot be taken for granted. Love for the family goes deep, and you gave us that experience to have it who. So the Hawaiian way is being able to use your maka to look and to assess, to examine for what is obvious and you see. But it's also your maka that tells you, you know the family situation, what is missing, what is not there that should be there, because that is information. Yeah? The same with the hearing. What is said, but the behavior, is it consistent? Is it only waha? Is it only lip service? And the behavior is something else. That tells you incongruence. Okay? The fragrance that you pick up when you go into a place, that gives you an idea about how they live, how they handle their personal lifestyle, the sanitation, the care by which they take care of clothing, of leftover foods. So, in Ho'oponopono, being able to pull all of these elements together comprises the Hawaiian Way. The Hawaiian Way also takes into account spirituality. I make a distinction between religion, which is an institution, religious institution, versus spirituality from the family. Okay? So we have spirituality that is related to mana. Mana is sacred power. Mana is your special talent. It is your abilities that each of you are born with, because you get these connections from your deceased ancestors. Okay. For some of us, somebody will say, oh, you look just like your grandma. Or you act just like your tutu man. You know, these are the connections. And we know that within the Mo'oku'auhau, we encourage the one going into Ho'oponopono to recognize as much as the DNA from ancestors from Kawakahiko was there, it gets passed on down to us today. How many of you watch, well, I watch Facebook. I'm just a new one onto Facebook about a year now. So I'm really fascinated. And it talks about people who pay the fee and then get this information about what percentage they are of this group, this group, this group, this group. Yeah, okay. That to me sounds like the DNA connection that they never knew, because they pass just for maybe 1 or 2 when they have 7. Okay, so Hawaiians have always recognized Aumakua from Kawakahiko, from ancient times. And Aumakua are deceased relatives who have been noted and elevated to the deity level because of extraordinary things that they did and are remembered. So when I went to do Ho'oponopono, I had to track my DNA all the way back through my genealogy, and I found that 7 generations back, I had Ohana that was doing Ho'oponopono. So I inherited those from my father's side. I inherited those from my mother's side. So doing genealogy to track that DNA meant my father's mama and papa's and back, and then my mother's mama and papa and back. And so in doing this, I confirmed for myself that my family, Mo'oku'auhau, showed me the pathway to get answers to questions that I had. And it provided answers to me in a way that solidified my decision to become a social worker. Yeah. So the opportunity is there for you folks. It's like when I was doing genealogy work and I go into the archives, then I come across this one document. Suddenly I have 3, 4 generations of names that link me. And suddenly I get so filled inside because I've been searching like a detective. And I'm getting answers with this one document. Yeah. In social work, part of what we do is we hope by doing mo'oku'auhau with those that need, that are in prison, that are in trouble, we hope that connecting them with mo'oku'auhau can set them on a more positive connection with genealogy and help them look at themselves with different lenses, because they know themselves as being troublemakers. They know themselves as creating problems in the family. They know themselves as having a police record and a jailbird. How do we help them move from that? You gotta begin with themselves first. How do you help them realign how they can see themselves and know that there is hope? Mo'oku'auhau is one of the pathways, yeah. So beginning with that, that's the Hawaiian way. Now, why do I say that? And that's because it's related to my own journey. When I went to school to become a social worker, I only learned the Hawaiian Way. which is good. Theories and ways of doing things. So I learned Freud. I learned Jung. No kamakau, no malo, nothing. And then I work in a Hawaiian agency and I get Hawaiian families. And they get dreams. And the more they tell the dreams to the doctor says, oh, mopopuli, I got to give you some more medication. So, if we're going to work in the community and we happen to be working with Hawaiian families, why begin with an outside perspective? Why not start where they're at, the Hawaiian perspective, and help them get reconnected with the Hawaiian way? Not easy, hard. Many of them are in the pilikia that they're in because no belief in spirituality. Yeah. No belief in religion. Religion is necessary for some people. I'm a Christian. I believe in God. But I also believe in my aumakua, on all of the Oʻahu that I have inherited. Yeah. And by going that route, oh, it has enriched me so much more. And I'm thinking, if that can happen to me, and I'm pretty good, how might it help and change others who are struggling? Yeah. So I like to tie in Hawaiian practices. I also recognize that many of those that I work with no longer are very Hawaiian. They become so disconnected that it's got to be a combination of both. Yeah. And so for the programs that recognize the deficit, such as Ahakane, in recognizing that men's roles and men's talents have fallen by the wayside. So the effort might be to reconnect the male with the positive practices that can help them to feel good as a male and send them on a more positive journey. Yeah.
Oh, you got about 5 or 6 questions in that.
Okay. He's basically asking, how can I influence? And he's looking at youth. What do I need to do so that I can connect with them in a way that will be the role model for people to make their choice? But I think hidden in that question is also, how can I get that magic that touches them so that they turn around? Okay. All of us desire to have that sense of magic in us so that we can influence our children, our nieces and our nephews, so that hopefully they see options, they see possibilities in making life's decisions. While children are young, adults have the greatest opportunity to influence them. So you as the role model, your impact on that child while they're young is pretty great, you know, because they're going to listen to you. You tell them, they're going to listen. Like mommies and daddies tell the kids, no, you got to go to bed now. Put that away. Give me that iPhone or give me that iPad. Time out, pow, go to sleep. Chances are they listen to you. But that child gets to a point in the teenage years, the upper teenage years, where nature has them struggling between wanting to make choices for themselves because they want it, or making choices because that's the thing that's supposed to be done, or being able to do something without any guilt, but doing something that you know might get them in a little bit of trouble, but they still want to try it. Helping them to deal with impulse reactions versus thought through reactions, yeah? And so parents are left with, what am I doing wrong? I never teach them this. And parents are not all bad. They do the best that they can with the strengths that they have. And sometimes the advice from outside affects that person more than inside. And so you got to recognize, maybe this is one of those times I got to let them go. I have a 19-year-old mo'opuna. I am going through that. And I bite my tongue all the time because his famous words are, I got him, Puna, I got him, no worry. That's what you said 2 weeks ago and it's still never done. And I have to catch myself. He's at the stage where he's working. He's working. He went hustle for the job. But it's in Waikiki. And Puna cannot take him all the time. I live a mile from the nearest bus stop. That means he has to walk to the bus stop to get the bus. And it'll take him 2 hours by bus to get to Waikiki. But he wants to work there. And you know, I had to wrestle with choices. Let him walk. Get up early. No, make it easy for him. He hints, I need a scooter. Oh, I was looking on Facebook and get one for $300. I said, is that a good buy? He said, I think so, Puna. And I know it's a come on, Puna, help me out. So I said, well, if you want me help you, I'll do this for you. Give me half of your paycheck and I save them for you. And when I save that amount of money, I'll give it to you. So I have to think on my toes, you know, and not just give in to, oh, this boy gotta get up by 6 o'clock to make the 7 o'clock bus so he can get to work by 8:30 at Waikiki. Oh, that's so early, he gotta wake up, you know. The tutu thinking like this, and my heart bleeds for him. But then I gotta remember, he's at this age, and he's gonna try to con me. He knows it. He works some magic because he's my hiapo. And I bite my tongue. So just knowing that your decision and the way you're functioning is the role model. And once you decide that path, no back off. You got to be able to say to myself, is this reasonable? And if it is reasonable, you got to enforce it, whether they like it or not. Because in the final analysis, what they learn is they are responsible for their choices. And I said to him, why don't you stick at O'Reilly's in Kaneohe across Windward Mall? Because then he can catch ride with us when we go to work. My daughter goes to work, he get the auntie. Or me when I come into town for this series, then he can catch a ride and I can drop him off. No, he decided, Waikiki, surf, surf. And I recognized that. I was his age at one time. And I did things behind my parents' back, and I never told them about it. And luckily, everything worked out okay. And I'm saying, he needs to experience life. He needs to experience consequences of his choices. Yeah? And the main thing is I'm there. If it goes wrong, I'm there. I'm still a foundation. Yeah? So, no easy answer. The main thing is that you have thought through, and from your perspective, this is the best approach. You're going to win some, you're not going to win them all, because they have to learn. What is the Hawaiian way? The Hawaiian way is be true to your na'au. Use your 5 senses to critically think and come to a choice, a decision. Be prepared. You don't control the other person. In the final analysis, they make that decision, but you've given it your best shot. Ho'oponopono allows for making mistakes. And when my grandson makes a mistake, he knows we have to go ho'oponopono. So he has to own up to the faulty thinking that he had. He has to own up to using, I got it, Puna, I got it. That his manipulative behavior, yeah, gets him into trouble. Yeah. So that's what ho'oponopono can do. Prevent small situations from escalating and becoming big. And the proof of your pudding is your own persona in coming across in a genuine way, living up to what you believe and demonstrating it.